Hello, all you intrepid seekers after knowledge. I won't lie, I've probably rewritten this whole script at least 20 times by now, trying to work out the most succinct way to arrange my points without diluting their substance, and I'm still not sure I've wholly succeeded. But such is life. I'll do my best to explain my points without tacking on a constellation of asterisks to each, but I can only promise so much given that I mean to do here for civilization, and all the constituent institutions thereof, what my theory of everything video did for the human psyche. However, just to make sure that all my bases are covered, I'll direct you now to the playlist I've linked down in the description, whose diverse subject material this video is going to be an abridged synthesis, at least in theory. In short, I mean here to distill the cyclical pattern of civilizational expansion and collapse we see time and again throughout history by drawing a direct comparison to the natural world. My novel point for this video is that in a world of infinite desires and finite resources, the more atomic, entropic a society becomes, the less interconnected and interdependent its individual nodes are, the more degenerative, dysfunctional, and less moral our civilization becomes. In other words, the more our so-called moral betters and thought leaders try to forcibly disconnect us from our primeval inclinations in pursuit of their delirious ideological fantasies, i.e., the more they try to force symbiosis on us through their social alchemical programs, the more parasitic we all in actuality become, which sooner or later inevitably results in resentment-fueled revolution, which, if left unchecked or its underlying issues remain unresolved, ultimately becomes the death knell for a society, both collective and individual alike. To quote my own in progress, grimdark science fantasy book, Aurum Terra. In a world where lions own the sheep, a lone wolf should not make plans to grow old. But when the sheep outgrow the lion's pen, all that will survive them is a world of starving wolves. There you go. You have your intellectual treat for the day. You can click off now if you want, as even with all of my editing, this is still going to be one of my longer diatribes. But if that doesn't scare you, then let us dive straight into the deep end. Oh, also, one last quick warning. I'll probably use the word system so many times in the next 10-ish minutes that you'll be hearing it tonight in your dreams. Anyway, let's actually get on with it now, shall we? If you've been around the internet, particularly the newsworthy sections of it, over the last several years, you'll have certainly heard people tossing around terms like the Great Reset, the Fourth Turning, and civilizational collapse, usually with a helpfully grim dose of Civil War or World War III slathered onto the speaker's taste. And if you've watched any number of my videos, or glanced at the title and runtime of this one, you'll certainly be aware that I've been paying attention and have concocted my own independent thesis on the matter, as per my usual way, and that such is my intent to share the fruits of that mental labor with you. But where do I start? The same place I always do, of course. First principles and definitions, which first begins at the word, and that word, or words to be more precise, of preeminent import to today's topic is power, hitherto defined by me as the ability to do. Also, we must acknowledge that all systems, be they natural or man-made, are, in of and by themselves, totally apathetic to the cause and see only the result of a given action. I.e., so long as any organism can survive and reproduce, nature doesn't care how it does it. Likewise, capitalism does not care from whence the money flows, just that it does, as capitalism is just economic Darwinism. However, while morals and ethics don't exist in nature, they do exist and are a quintessential component of society. Why? Because without a code of definitely acceptable and unacceptable behaviors, what point would there be in even having a society in the first place? At the end of the day, all societies, and every corporate system nested therein, rely on the collective cooperation of the individuals within in order to function. And as humans have a high investment reproductive strategy, it takes 15 to 20 years to raise a human infant to adulthood compared to just 2 to 5 years for most other mammals. The continuation of our species depends nearly entirely upon our being able to keep a reasonably safe and secure environment for at least that long. Our environment referring just as much to our human communities as it does the natural world. To do this, the varied interests of the collective and the individual must be held in equilibrium, i.e., a majority of your people must perceive operating within the system to be a net boon to them. Otherwise, they will either seek to reform, restructure, replace, or otherwise simply abandon the system altogether, depending on what they see as being the most practical and least risky option. But what exactly causes our systems to decay? Why can we never seem to maintain that equilibrium for more than a handful of generations? Where is this disruptive, destabilizing force coming from? If you look at your screen, you'll see that I've sketched out the Song of Songs' general rhythm in an 8-part circular scale, consisting of 4 major epics and 4 minor phases. I'll leave you to pause and ponder on that at your discretion, as this script desperately doesn't need any more bloat. But in short, I believe that the inevitable clockwork cycle is driven by what I've chosen to call ecosystemic entropy. Entropy being the tendency for energy to equalize throughout a closed system. The closed part of that is critical, and so naturally is the part most people forget about. And an ecosystem is a system or group of interconnected elements formed by the interaction of a community of organisms with their environment. Now, I chose those words very deliberately, because the fundamental engine of all systemic rot within human civilization is the same as often kills a natural biome. Google wolves of Yellowstone to get a more direct idea of what I'm on about, or simply remember what Mufasa told Simba about their role in the circle of life, and you'll have something of a clue. The first and primary thing to understand going forward is that there are 3 types of relationships any 2 organisms can have with one another: parasitic, codependent, and symbiotic. Everyone knows what a parasite is. It's a net drain on a system, meaning that it extracts more value from the relationship than it provides in exchange. By contrast, symbiosis ensures a net boon for both parties by socializing all gains while privatizing all losses, i.e., elevating one elevates all, but the fall of one does not drag down the collective. You can probably guess why most individualists oppose this method of societal construction. Codependence, meanwhile, is the mirror opposite, privatizing gains while socializing losses. In some sense, you can justifiably call it mutual parasitism. Needless to say, this is the system type which most collectivists of every sort prefer, and so it is the one that nearly all humans have labored under since time immemorial. In short, symbiosis benefits the collective in the long term, though at the cost of leaving the individual prone to abandonment when they fail to keep up in the short term, as the collective feels no imperative to forestall their own momentum in order to help the stragglers. Parasitism benefits the individual at the utter expense of the group, and codependence, during the good times at least, offers the best of both, while compensating for the parasitic tendencies of the individual and the disposability mentality of the collective. Oh, you thought I was going to say that symbiosis was the solution? That we should all strive to be good little citizen wage units like in the Soviet Union, or cogs and grease monkeys for an industrial system that considers us dispensable pawns for its nebulous, greater good. You're obviously very new around here. But you might also understandably say, I thought symbiosis was where we all link arms and sing Kumbaya while sipping mimosas on the holodeck of the Starship Enterprise as we boldly fly off into that brave new tomorrow. What you just described sounds more like a dystopian hive world out of Warhammer 40K. That doesn't sound very symbiotic to me. And in principle, you'd be right. But remember what we said at the beginning. There is no such thing as morality in nature, and humans are a part of nature, no matter how well we fool ourselves into believing otherwise. The key to understanding why, in practice, codependence works and symbiosis does not is to look more closely at the word codependence. Together, mutually, jointly. Dependence, reliance, confidence, trust. What in practice compels the individual to sacrifice its own goals, wants, or even needs for those of the collective is not some higher altruistic sense of morality, but the knowledge that doing so is to their own benefit in the long run. I.e., what compels a man to work, to go to war, to get married? Is it because he wants so desperately to be a slave to someone else's devices? Of course not. It is because doing so wins him a sense of utmost fulfillment, some of the time, at having achieved his biological imperative. Just so goes the way for every other endeavor of human life. But note, the dependence is not mutual in the altruistic sense, since, as we've established, that would imply that most of the individuals within were intrinsically selfless, going about their daily grinds for no other reason than duty to some nebulous greater good. Altruism is a myth, straight up. a nonsense lie invented and spouted by parasites to gaslight their other halves into accepting a lopsided deal. The simple, hard truth of the world is that people will only consent to cooperate so long as they continue to need each other. When one side has no further use for the other one, they have no further reason to make sacrifices, to make the relationship work, as is the common phrase, and so their social contract dissolves. Again, observe the on-screen diagram for a better idea of just what I'm on about. Now, some of you might well think that actually used to be the case, that back in the good old days, everyone just knew their role and people just did what was right simply because it was the right thing to do, or because the Bible told them to, or something else to that effect. Well, if the above sentiment applies to you, then answer me this. Why is it that societies where the citizenry is made explicitly aware that their lives' purpose is to be gristle for an impersonal, apathetic machine state always collapse faster and more violently than those who at least offer some pretense at reciprocity? Or perhaps a better question would be, why do complex machines, clocks, cars, motors, etc., that receive routine care and maintenance tend to work longer and better than those that are just left out to the elements? But of course, there is still a colossal pink elephant in the room to contend with, namely that, as a wise man once said, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And the massive trade-off at the heart of this video's core premise is that while codependent systems are more stable in the short term as they provide mutual selfish incentive to cooperate, symbiotic ones are more stable long-term because they promote the overall health and well-being of the system itself, which the individual relies upon for their own health and well-being, whether they appreciate that fact or not. But on the other side of the coin, truly symbiotic systems are, always were, and always will be an idealistic pipe dream because they rely on everybody altruistically putting the greater good ahead of their own selfish gains, which most will never voluntarily do, and anyone who actually does will always be systematically exploited by the ones who don't. And as another wise man once said to me, if you have to force it, you're doing it wrong. And codependent systems always devolve into parasitism as soon as the delicate balance of power shifts too far to one side of the proverbial scale. This is why communism always begets a failed state dictatorship, and capitalism always devolves into oligarchy and feudalism. It is just the way people work. We want what we want, and if we can get more while giving up less, most of us will take the deal. Be damned any or all consequences for our civilization at large. What we're seeing now in 2024 is the culminated symptoms of 4+ generations of imbalanced power structure. I'll let you decide which parts of our own wheel are currently overweighted for yourself, as that's a whole other diatribe in and of itself, and I think I've about run out my ramblings welcome for one day. So I think that's where I'll leave off for now. There's still plenty more that I could cover, of course. Plenty of side tangents and details that I've had to scrap or leave on the cutting room floor for the sake of brevity, and at some future date, I very well might make those into their own separate videos. But for right now, farewell. Stay safe, stay sane, and may peace ever be upon you.